Without further ado, Hernandez, who will be followed by Stephanie Murphy.
What do you guys think about that? Welcome to Space City. Some of you were with us last night when we met astronaut Megan McArthur, and I'm thrilled to bring you a little bit more of space today, our space exploration industry. As you saw, there are a lot of things happening right now and in the future in the space exploration industry, and it takes a lot of work. It's hard. The journeys are hard that we have in front of us, and it takes a lot of really good leadership skills in order to accomplish that. So I'm Ann Hernandez. As she said, I'm the Director of Leadership Programs and Inclusion for Space Center Houston, and I'm hoping to bring you some of those insights from the space exploration industry as we dive into conversation today. So Space Center Houston is the official visitor center of NASA Johnson Space Center. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit educational foundation, and we invite people from all over the world to come closer to space exploration. You know, and this all started really in Houston with the announcement that we're going to the moon. And JFK in 1962 that you see here, actually it was this week of September in 1962 that he did the public announcement that we are going to the moon in that decade before 1970. And we're doing it not because it's easy, but because it is hard. And I know you all are doing things not because it's easy, but it's because you're passionate, because you know there's a lot of hard work, and you're leading teams through that hard work also. Now, this era of beginning really that human exploration into deeper space beyond just Earth's orbit was really male-driven. It was a very male-dominant industry, and you see even in this picture, I don't think I see a single woman supporting this big announcement. And now the space industry is entrepreneurial boom. It also has an inclusive boom where we have women at the head of NASA Johnson Space Center. We have women at the head of private companies and that are leading all sorts of teams across this industry. And really in those senior roles. So if you can imagine, as we'll be talking about today in conversation, not just NASA, but it's really all of these companies, many of which are in Houston and across the country, that are helping doing all these projects and leading this big effort. It can be competitive, and we talked a little bit in that last session around who's doing what? Is it similar to my work? Is it not similar, right? Some of that same thing is happening in the space industry as well. But there are some common goals that unite people and that unite our women leaders also in the space industry. And that's workforce development, leadership development, management of, especially of projects, development of understanding that, collective achievement of what are humans being able to do as we finish these projects, whether it's your company or my company or NASA, being able to do that. And also an agreement on mission, an agreement on really that vision of where we want to go into space and how it's going to benefit humanity. So one of the indicators that this collective achievement and this ecosystem is ready to contribute and collaborate is how we at Space Center Houston, here, we're a hub for all these different organizations coming together. And we get to hear the stories, we get to hear about innovations, and leaders talk with us and tell us about what they're learning. And I've heard a lot of those stories, and what I've seen is that when we learn together, there's a really big impact that we can make. And so I've been chatting with a few of you as we started our celebrations last night, and several of you mentioned that you don't get a lot of chance to get out, that this might be your first maybe summit or conference together, or it's only maybe once a year you get to chat with other restaurant owners and entrepreneurs and chefs alike. And so I want you to really take advantage of that time today and in this week that we have together. So I wanted to start our juices flowing by having some conversations around us. So we're going to make some kind of little ad hoc groups surrounding some of the supplies that we are passing out to you at your tables. And I have a few questions for you that I want you to rate. So if you're sitting next to an envelope that was handed out, you go ahead and reach inside there. And you have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you're going to chat with people nearby. You're going to make little groups, and you're going to do some consensus on as I read these statements. Think about is this true for you? Is it not true for you? I might say a 1. My partner might say 5. Another person might say 3. We're going to decide on what number we might hold up together as a group. Okay? So the first statement: I believe the best way to manage a team is to set the vision and then give the people the freedom to follow it. Chat together. What do you think? Think about the nuance of this question. Okay, decide on a number together. Decide on a number. When you're ready, you can hold it in the air. Okay, I'm looking around the room, holding up your numbers. I see a lot of 3s. I see a couple 2s, and a 4 and 1 5. One team feels very strongly about this. Does anyone want to just give one little comment? Nuance on this? How about somebody that was in the 3s? That's right in the middle of the scale, a nuance.
You have to balance keeping people accountable and moving along on something. You have to share the vision and get energized by that and have freedom.
Awesome. Yeah, so what inspires, but then also what do you need to handle to make sure it's working? Yeah, great. Love it. Thank you. All right, let's do another one. Working with your same team, 1 is low on the scale, 5 is high on the scale, very true for us. I value feedback, and I collect input from my team across multiple opportunities. Chat together. Okay, hold up your number. What do you think? All right, final ratings. I see a number of 5s. What else? Okay, if you haven't held up your rating, hold up your rating. Where you're at, 5s, 4s, I see a 3. Okay, I want to hear about a couple of these opportunities. What are some different ways that you seek feedback from your team? What are some different ways? What was it? Great. So an end of the day debrief and having conversation. Good. With gratitude, I heard. Anonymous surveys. Anybody else do surveys? Yeah, that's what you're going to say? What, another way? Is there another way?
So if someone needed to reach out to her personally, they knew when her schedule was available in the office and they could reach out to her. And that's been super valuable because there's not a lot of time that you actually get to interact with each other. You have a busy bar, you have a busy restaurant. Everyone's busy and like working and thinking about those things. So that dedicated hour to being available is really important. This day of being available has been very valuable.
Thank you. So she's saying having office hours basically or open door hours that you state so that people know when you're available each day. And then also having weekly meetings was a part of that too. Great. Okay, let's do another one. All right, this one is I encourage my team to pursue and test new ideas. Chat together. Okay, if you have your rating, hold up your rating. What's your consensus? All right, I see a spread here. There's some 5s, there's some 4s, there's some 3s, there's some 2s. There's no 1s yet in the air. All right, can I have 2 comments on this one? Yeah.
I think is we need to encourage our team to be creative. First of all, I'm going to say from the kitchen. Yeah, I encourage our team to be creative. I believe that if we crush that creativity, people die. It's like a flower. You need to nourish. And what I do is I will tell them, let's do it. And we can all test it as a team, especially like creating a new pizza. If somebody has an idea, I had this kid who's very creative, and every week he was like, let's do this, let's do that. So I say, yeah, let's do it. Cook it for us. How do you feel making dinner for all of us? And we all can have fun, discuss about the food, give feedback, see what can we improve. And right now we have a pizza called the Todo Eden. And it's wonderful. So the ultimate decision is based on us and the team.
Awesome, thank you. And so it's also to create, but then to showcase your creation as well with each other. One more idea on this? Yes.
So I think for this one, thank you. I think when we talk about ideas, it's also important to not just, I think a lot of us went to recipes right away, but as we're business owners and leaders, we're not on the line anymore. We're not washing dishes. Maybe we're not involved in the front of house as much as the back of house. So encouraging ideas means letting other people who do those jobs every day take the agency to make that job better and to make things more streamlined and more efficient. So I almost never say no. I don't like saying no because I know that I'm not the one down there. I'm like working on budgets upstairs. Like if they want to change something in the dish pit, like do what makes your life easier, and then it makes them happier. And like I haven't had any turnover since the pandemic, and my longest employee has been at my restaurant for 33 years.
Wow.
It's longer than I've been alive.
Awesome. So it's giving them the ownership also to make those decisions and to be creative. All right, let's go to the last one. My staff understands the decisions I make, and sees me as a trustworthy leader. Chat together. Okay, I see lots of 5s. I see some 4s. All right, so I see a lot of 5s and 4s. I see a 2 out there. Does anybody want to add a comment about this? Anyone want to add a comment? about the decisions and the trust. Yes. Oh, sorry, right behind you.
So when I structure my team, like, they understand the decisions I make when it comes to their particular role. They don't necessarily understand the decisions I make when it's not directly pertaining to their role. I take the approach that I give them like the brief outline of what we're doing, but it's my job to carry the weight of understanding all the parts. And if I give them all the parts to understand, they'll take on more of the stress that they don't need to carry.
Yeah. So as a leader, you're filtering information to make it as effective and understandable as possible, but then you also have to think about how much people are trusting in order for you to make that decision and are gonna sit with it and live with it, right? Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So what we do at Space Center Houston is take these ideas from NASA and from this different space companies throughout the space industry, and then we think about organizations and groups and industries like yours and share some of those learnings back. So we have a corporate leadership program, corporate training and team building workshops that we do called the Human Performance Accelerator Lab. And in the HPA lab, we bring in research and insights from the space world and from NASA and merge it with effective business practices. And from those insights, we have 3 mindsets that we focus on in that work. And under those 3 mindsets, you see a lot of different categories that can be pulled out in discussion, conversation that can be pulled out in there. Last night, Megan mentioned one of the first mindsets. Directly, I think about it as the astronaut mindset, which is the expeditionary mindset. So when you think about high-performing teams together, especially when you think about astronaut teams together, they really need to focus on how they're communicating, how they're collaborating together. They're in life and death situations. They're having big jobs to do in an environment that may change quickly. And they're also thinking about the diversity of that team, making sure that they understand how to effectively get those messages across different language barriers, different culture barriers, and do that quickly and efficiently. And there's a lot on collaboration within this mindset as well, as Megan was describing a little last night. The growth mindset might be familiar with from some of the studies and things that you've done in the business world, but growth mindset is very important at NASA and in the space industry. This is thinking about what's possible. Thinking about that next innovation, thinking about where we want to go, having your eye on that vision way far out in the future, 10, 20, 30, 50 years in the future what we want to do. So for example, right now, the big missions at NASA are called the Artemis missions. That's us going back to the moon. We saw JFK saying the first time we're going to the moon, we're going back to the moon, but we're going back to the moon in an area that we've never sent humans before. And we're going to be staying there longer and on the moon. And that is helping us get to Mars and beyond into deeper space. So even though we're not back to the moon yet, we're close, we're very close, years away, but we're already thinking way far out in the future. So what are those more possibilities? And also, how do we learn together as an organization, as a team? That's extremely important. And those continuous improvements, examining what we have now and how do we look beyond that? And how do we change, make tweaks here and there so that we can be successful in our growth? And then finally, the overview effect. The overview effect is a term, has anybody heard that before? When talking with astronauts, or, as you talk with astronauts, you did last night, or when you read about space. So the overview effect is a term for when astronauts have gone into space and they look back down on the Earth. They see this fragile blue marble. Maybe you've heard that quote before. That comes from the overview effect. And they're talking about the planet is this system that they realize is very delicate. And we have to take a lot of care for it. It means sustainability. It could mean sustainability for your business. It could mean the sustainability of this awesome team that hasn't left and has been hanging around for 30 years. How do I make sure that that system stays consistent? It might mean that when they look back on the earth, they also might see, hey, all these borders and these trade lines and all these things that we get really hung up on and these barriers that we make present around the world actually don't exist when we look back. So how do I see the broader, bigger picture in my business, on my team? How do I get people out of their silos, out of their little individual jobs that they do, and how do I get them to think about the bigger picture? So as we talk today, and I'm going to invite Stephanie up in just a moment, as we chat with Stephanie and as we chat together, I want you to think about these three mindsets in the work and how it applies to the work that you're doing. So let's dive in. I want to bring Stephanie up. As you heard, Stephanie is the CEO of Aegis Aerospace, and they are an advanced space and technology company. They actually work with the ISS as one of the many projects that they do, and they utilize a privately owned, the first woman-owned laboratory on the International Space Station. Yes, let's give that a round of yes. Yes, Stephanie. Stephanie is also a leader here in Houston on many boards and committees and chambers, and in Texas as a state in the space industry. And she's also a board member at Space Center Houston. And her company was recognized in Latino Leaders magazine as one of the largest Latino-owned companies in the U.S. Yes. And I'll just add that she was telling me earlier that she also is an entrepreneur and owner of an ice cream shop and snow cone business. Who knew? So let's give a round of applause to Stephanie.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to tell you just a little bit about my story and how I ended up owning this aerospace company. Because I don't have a technical degree. I'm not an engineer, and that's pretty unusual for someone in this space, no pun intended. So let me tell you a little bit about Aegis Aerospace and how I ended up here. And then I think Ann has a few sort of questions about high-performing teams, and we're happy to take some questions from you guys as well. So my dad actually founded an aerospace engineering company in the early 90s. He's an engineer by training, by degree. He's had a career in the Air Force. He retired from the Air Force and started his company. And I had decided when I went to college that I did not want to be an engineer. I saw what he did. I thought that was, a little bit boring for me. I was, a teenager who was proud. And I got a degree in business from Texas A&M. And when I got out of school, my husband-to-be, he was my fiancé at the time, was in the Navy and gone on a lot of deployments. So I came home, lived with mom and dad, started saving up money, working for his company, thinking that that would be a temporary thing. And, almost 30 years later, I own that company now. So that didn't work out quite the way I thought it would. But I realized that I really had a knack for business, and I never worked directly for my dad. I worked for other people always. I never was his direct report, and he did that on purpose, and he sort of put me through this ultimate rotation plan in the company. And so in a couple of years, within 10 years, I was managing all of the corporate functions of our company. Then we were about 850 employees across 11 states, and I just realized I had a knack for it. So I went back to school, got my MBA, graduated in 2014, and around that time, NASA was putting out a call for ideas to commercialize parts of the space station. So a lot of you are probably familiar with Commercial Crew Program or Commercial Cargo. That's, SpaceX is taking stuff back and forth to the space station, or astronauts to the space station, Boeing as well, though they're having a tough go lately. And so NASA did a call for what they called commercial space providers. So could we provide a system or a laboratory or sort of a box where science can be done on a commercial basis? And so my dad's company that I still worked for at the time, we had an idea to commercialize a program that tested materials on the outside of the space station, and to do that as a private program instead of as a government program. We knew that government program was going to be canceled because their budget was too high. And since I was feeling really good because I just got my MBA, and feeling like I kind of knew a thing or two, I said, hey, Dad, would you let me take this idea, pitch it to NASA, and take a couple engineers with me, and let me start a new company? And I really realized then that the work we did in his company as a traditional government contractor selling labor services was really different than going into this commercial model for the space station and building hardware. So we did that. We convinced NASA that it was a great idea. I had to, sit at the table with them a couple times, and they said, why would we want this new startup that has no history to take on commercializing this facility? And we had to convince them that it was the right thing to do, that we had the credibility and the past performance, the backing of MEI Technologies at the time. And I was sort of a new player in that regard. I had always been down and in the company, and I was learning to be up and out. And so they accepted it, and that's when I founded a company called Alpha Space Test and Research Alliance. Big mouthful, Alpha Space for short. In space industry, everything's acronyms too. So if I throw out an acronym and you don't know, just wave at me. So I started that in 2015, and that's how we ended up building and owning the first woman-owned private testing facility in space. It's attached to the outside of the space station. In 2017, I bought out my parents' company from them. My parents were getting ready to retire, and I decided I didn't want that to end their company or to go to someone else, and so I bought out their interest in that company. And in 2021, I put the two companies together, even though they have very different missions and cultures. We put them back together and created Aegis Aerospace. So we have a long heritage, over 30 years of doing testing in space, enabling testing in space. Half of what we do on our government services side is for NASA, and about half of what we do is for the Department of Defense. So we help them study different scientific things that they need to do in space. Just a couple of pictures here. Top right is a satellite that we did that actually ended up being the first commissioned satellite of the Space Force. So when we started working on that satellite and integrating some of their experiments for the Department of Defense, that was an Air Force satellite, and then the Space Force came to be, and so by luck and timing, that ended up being the first commissioned satellite for the Space Force. So we built that satellite, put it together, helped put all the experiments on board, launched it, and operated it for the Space Force. And in the bottom right corner, that's a picture of our facility that's attached to the space station. So that's what we call it, the MISSE. That stands for Materials on ISS Experiments. Everything's an acronym. So that's kind of a view looking down. We have these boxes that we plug in around the outside of the space facility. They're blue, and they go up and down about every 6 months on a launch, and we send people's science into space. That's sort of a space testing as a service model. And then the picture behind that is our operations center. We have a little office over here in Clear Lake, and we actually send commands and controls and take pictures and things from our office here. So our operator, clicks a button on his keyboard, and we're sending a command up to the space station or receiving data back down. It's really kind of phenomenal. So this is sort of a picture of what we do. On the top left, you can see Missy there with the carriers open. So you kind of see little squares and patches. Those are different samples of materials or polymers, paint coatings that we might be sending. We send active experiments too. Those are things that require power and data, right? So we can send computers, cameras, antennas, things like that. You can see a picture of that M1 satellite bus. That was our first satellite for Space Force. We're working with all the folks in Texas that are looking at building the next commercial space station. And it's sort of a retail model, right? They're building these commercial space stations, and we're looking to rent space from them like you would for your restaurant, right? To rent space from them so we can sell our service, which is space testing as a service. We also are sending a couple of payloads to the moon. That's something we're really proud of. So even though we're a small business, we're pretty unique in that we have a couple of payloads that are going to the moon. So one is called RAC there in the middle. That one is to test the lunar dust for NASA. That's really its whole purpose. And on the bottom right is STEF1. So my engineer who gave that a great acronym got a bonus for naming it after me. Everything's an acronym. So that's our space science test and evaluation facility. We're integrating 7 experiments from academia and private industry, and those will be going to the moon in 2026 on an intuitive machines lander. So that's a little bit about our platforms. Oops, let me see if I can get this to go. There we go. So who would want to test in space? This is just kind of a snapshot of the people that we help take their science or their articles or their testing into space. So you don't have to be a NASA scientist to get your stuff into space anymore. There are companies like mine that do that for you. So you can kind of see this is just a little picture of the folks that we help test in space. But each of these are one of our customers who have sent something into space. They don't necessarily know about space. They don't know how to work the NASA safety procedures. They don't know about launch and return. We take care of all of that. They pretty much come, bring their article. We give them some requirements that they have to meet. We go through the NASA safety process for them, and we help them get their items into space. They're usually attached to the outside of the space station, exposed to the space environment for about 6 months. And then they get their item back. So a little different than a satellite. If they were to send something on a satellite, those burn up or don't return. Our items actually come back, and we give it back to them so that they can perform more science on their article. And this is just a quick snapshot of what we have on Space Station today. So Space Station is really an orbiting laboratory. You can see where our MISSY facility is on the left-hand side. Down at the bottom, you see these acronyms STP and H series, right? STP is the Space Test Program. That's a program for the Space Force. The H series just means that it's coming out of Houston, and they're numbered. And so we've helped build these platforms that integrate science for the Department of Defense that are all attached to the space station today. And then we do some work with a robotic repair satellite up there as well. Top right is our RAC, our regolith adherence characterization. So that's a payload going to the moon on a Firefly mission next year. And then the bottom right is that STEF payload I talked about, which is going on an intuitive machines lander in 2026. So that's just a little bit about my company, kind of give you a preview about what we do and how I ended up here.
Great, and we have a...
Do you need to switch slides or no?
Yeah, I'll take that, thank you. We have a great photo of, remember last night Megan was talking about that fresh fruit delivery? This is a picture of that on the International Space Station with some astronauts. We thought it was a nice picture as we chat today. So Stephanie, your company does a lot, has a wide portfolio. And I am curious about, what do you find is crucial to the way that your team works? Some other folks here also have a pretty big business, or maybe different brick and mortar or carts that they're operating as well, and different kinds of projects. What do you think is crucial the way your team works?
Well, we have several teams within our company who support different customers or different missions. A lot of engineers, really high-tech people, and for us, I'm sure you will relate to this, people that are high-performing like to work with other high-performing people. So one of the things we try to do is make sure that we recruit and hire really well from the beginning. If we have someone who's misplaced maybe on a team, try to put them in the skill set that they excel at. We've learned over time, people can work on their weaknesses, but really you want to enhance their strengths. And so we try to put them in areas where they have the most strengths and balance what their weaknesses may be. And if someone's not a right fit, although it can be really hard, we have to move on quickly from that, because having a low performer mixed in with a very high performing team causes morale problems, frustrations, communication problems, things like that. And so we're also set up with a set of systems. Space is very hard. Things don't always go well. There's not always an easy way to fix or repair what you're doing. And we also send a lot to the space station where there are humans there. And so what we do has to be very reliable. Safety is paramount, reliability is paramount. And so we try to set up our teams in a way that they have systems that sort of take care of the everyday decisions, so they aren't wasting their brain power on sort of the everyday things. They can use their brain power for things that are creative or engineering solutions. So that's some of the things that we do.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a lot of problem solving because there are big projects and essential things that need to be decided, especially when we're talking about in space. What are some things that you do to instill a culture for your teams to think differently, to do that problem solving?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think being one of the few commercial space companies, when we split off and created Alpha Space, we had to set up a culture that was very open. We did, for first couple of years, daily huddles. So we just got everybody together, no formal agenda, but just kind of what's going on, what do we need to problem solve, what are our challenges today. That helped just set a culture, and so those sort of hallway talks still happen just as part of our organic nature. To bring in the creativity, we also set up some systems that allow that to happen. We do sort of Shark Tank things on a regular basis, get our engineers thinking. But then we also do it a little more organically. I have an open door policy. Our engineers are very open to it. We have set up other businesses along the way. I actually have experience working with my dad in the first engineering company, starting and stopping about a dozen other companies or spinoffs or joint ventures. So our employees just see that that's sort of part of our culture, that we're very open to taking ideas forward, moving them forward, enabling that. Some of them have been investors or owners in part of those ventures, and some have succeeded and gone on to do great things, and some have not. So there's a lot of lessons learned there, but I think it's just sort of innate in our culture and our systems that we've set up.
And I hear a lot of giving opportunities in what you're saying. And I think with that giving opportunities, there's some relationship that happens. And I wonder if you could talk, just as we talked about in our poll a little bit about trust being so crucial, could you talk a little bit about what are some things that your team has done to build trust with each other or build trust with you?
That's a great question. Just this year, last year, I realized we had a mix of employees who had been with us 30 years and employees who had been with us 3 months at our leadership level. We had a really big mix. And so we went through a formal program called Pathways to Leadership. It was an investment we made in the company and the leadership team. And it brought us all together and realigned us around our business imperative and our what we call our human imperative. So business imperative are our goals, right? What are we going to do? What are our financial targets? What's our growth target? But our human imperative is like, how do we want to work with each other? How are we going to accomplish those goals? So just going through that process, built a camaraderie. We spent a couple days off-site in a facilitated session doing that. And it built the camaraderie, the trust. We worked on these, we created teams of folks in our leadership group who may not normally work with each other to meet and practice these leadership tools we learned. We did a 12-week program for that formally. And they have built these bonds that I couldn't even have anticipated. It's been really amazing. And so we kind of brought that program to a close, and I asked them, what do you want to do? We call them PAC teams. What do you want to do with your PAC teams? Do we want to continue? Do we want to switch it up? And like overwhelmingly, every person wanted to continue meeting with their PAC team because the bonds they built were so deep. They didn't want to change. They built this trust. They kind of felt like they had their go-to people. So that was one example of something that we did to try to help align everybody together.
I love that. And I feel like when you get those smaller teams, they start building trust, they start being creative together, problem solving as we talked about. But then sometimes they emerge with new ideas and shifts. And we were chatting earlier about how to handle some of those new ideas. Is it to showcase them? Is it to dive in and let them have the freedom to pursue that? Can you talk a little bit about how you deal as a leader with emerging ideas, new ideas, knowing that they could or could not be risky, and in your business, it might mean life or death risky, potentially.
Right. Yeah, so, gosh, that's such a good question. It's really hard to deal with all the ideas. So we employ a lot of engineers, which people think of engineers as maybe being nerdy or rigid, but they're great problem solvers. The other thing about engineers that we work with in the space industry is they're so attached to their mission. Like, sometimes they put the mission ahead of good business decisions because they love what they do. They love the idea of helping an astronaut get into space or helping get back to the moon or helping a company along the way, and they become so mission focused that their decisions are clouded. You know, they may have a business idea or a product idea that doesn't have a business case to support it. And it's probably a good idea, but it doesn't have a business case to support it, or maybe there's no customers for that product. So it's a balance. For us, I've also learned that the doers, those engineers, as they move up into leadership, sometimes those very things that help them move up into a leadership position make them a bad leader because they like to do it all, right? And they don't delegate. So we also have to help our leaders let go and allow the folks below them to actually do the doing, if that makes sense. And then they also know that as an owner and an entrepreneur, I have this curse where I just am never satisfied, right? I just feel like we got to do improve the next thing, improve the system, the next product. And I also have this, like, everything is figure outable, right? Just like, let's get started and we'll figure it out. And so they know that about me, and that's the tone in which I work. And so ideas come up in different ways, but we've had to put a system in place that forces them to think about the business case around some of those ideas so that we're not just, and we get a lot of great ideas and we can't do them all. Some are very risky, some are less risky. And it also, a lot of our ideas have to do with NASA or the Department of Defense. And those things don't just happen, right? We're dealing with very bureaucratic systems. A lot of things have to align and come together for us to be able to bring a new product to NASA and say, hey, would you buy this? You know, that doesn't just happen overnight. So we try to balance the creativity with good business sense.
Thank you. Yeah, I hear in the stories that you're sharing, I hear a lot about continuous improvement of processes, continuing to look and find new solutions, being creative, also being able to trust into smaller teams and diving deeper into the teams you're working with. And I'm wondering if you all have other themes that you're hearing here, or you have questions. This makes you think of stuff that you're working on as well. Are there any questions from the audience?
What is the most impactful thing you've done with your leaders in the course of your leadership to build camaraderie? Besides the Pathways program, like, is it something fun? What's something impactful you've done with your leaders?
Something impactful. Wow. You know, I like to get to know them personally. And so I just go in and have conversations with them, ask them about their family, what's going on. I really care about their families, ask them about their kids, what they're doing. I think that's one way I've been impactful with them. I think another way is I've trusted them when they bring ideas to me and they see that. Or if they want to do something different and take a different role in the organization, I think that builds a lot of trust too. When they come and say, you know, hey, I think I'm ready to jump over here and do this, or I'm not loving, the management as much. I want to get back to the technical, or I want to leave the technical and try to stretch my wings a little bit and do this. That builds a ton of trust when you're kind of working through a process with someone and trying to help them grow. I really like to try to understand where they want to get, what their goals are, because it's not the same for everybody. Not everybody has aspirations to go from being a great technical person to a great manager. They maybe just love the technical work that they do. So trying to understand that, I think, has helped build a lot of trust as well. It's a great question.
Other questions?
This talk was so inspiring and really exciting, so very excited to be here to witness this. I'm sure you have competitors.
Oh, yeah.
What makes you different from your competitors, or what do you think is feel is your unique selling point?
Yeah, we have a lot of competitors and people we compete with and then partner with, right? I'm sure you guys experience that as well. So someone may be our partner one day and our competitor the next. I think for us, for our company, we kind of have this little phrase that we use, work right. And that means like high integrity, high excellence, respect for people. And it's just kind of how we say it, how we capture those ideas. And we mean it, and I think our customers recognize that. So even though we're doing business with these big organizations or work with big companies like Boeing or Lockheed, you're still doing business with people, and you're still building those relationships. So I spend a lot of time working on those relationships and building champions in our customer set. And I think I've been successful in doing that because they know that we have high integrity. There are certain things we will not compromise on. When we are wrong, we admit it. That can be really painful sometimes. And we try to correct things as we move along. But that's something that I learned from my dad really early on. The other thing that we do is, and it's just sort of built in, but we try to practice reciprocity, right? You give, I give. But we always try to give first. We try to bring an idea first, or a connection, or a discount, whatever it may be. We try to set that tone that we're willing to work and negotiate, but we try to do that first. So that's another way that we do that.
Great. I saw a question in the middle. Mm-hmm.
I just have a question about feedback. If there's any tips for feedback from your leaders to you, and then also work for your leaders, getting feedback to them.
Yeah, feedback is probably one of our biggest challenges getting at my level, getting that up and down, because I have a president, I have a strategy officer, I have a financial person, but I don't have a lot of direct reports, right? They're kind of a layer or two layers down. So it's really hard to open that conduit to the next level. So we try to do informal meetings and, gather everybody up. We try to do fun stuff too, celebrations and birthday celebrations and happy hours and things like that. That helps because some of those things come up naturally in conversation. But I'm just about to institute a new meeting. I hate to add another meeting to our schedule. But so I'm going down a layer, and I'm sort of skipping my president, which he doesn't love. And I'm meeting with his direct reports so that they feel like they have that connection to me. They know they don't always have to go through him, because I have an open door policy, but it's still sometimes they don't want to bypass him. So I'm creating that meeting where they're forced to be in there with me directly. And so I think it opens up, it sort of breaks down that barrier of them feeling like they're bypassing him or doing something inappropriate. That's really tough to do. And then we just try to do good communication things across the organization. We have a newsletter. I go meet with our various employees. We work across multiple states, so that's a challenge. But I try to go sort of a round robin and meet with the employees directly. Same with our customers, to try to get that feedback up and down. And we do town halls also, so that helps.
I'll just add that feedback sessions and debrief sessions are very big at NASA. And after every project, everything that you do a debrief. And we have astronaut Mike Foreman, who happens to be a mayor in a suburb of Houston, in Friendswood. He talks about debrief in a way where he reminds us about power dynamics. And he says, even though I'm not the smartest person in the room, even though I'm not the actual person telling the directions, really astronauts are listening to mission control and they're telling them what they should be doing. But he knows he has power because of his position as an astronaut and an influence. And so he always tries to say what he did wrong first and what was a misstep for him and what he wants to improve so that people feel trust and feel safe to start talking about what they want to work on next too. Yes.
You mentioned you have a president, so that you cannot be chief everything officer, really focused on being CEO. At what point did you know it was the right time to implement a president, and how has that transition been for you? I'm sure it's been a journey. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, that has been a big challenge over the last couple of years. So I haven't always been CEO. I actually, when I was running Alpha Space and when I bought out my parents' company, MEIT, I hired a president to come run Alpha Space at the time so that I could come back to MEIT, which had kind of stalled out on growth. And I was going to come back and focus. And MEIT had a CEO in place already. So I didn't want to displace him. So I took the chairman position, but an executive chairman position, which meant I was a working chairman, right, down in the organization. And when I got to the point where I decided to put the companies together, that was one of the toughest integrations I've had to do because we had too many leaders. So I took my president, from Alpha Space, and I made him the CEO of the combined entity for the first year. And I had to let that other CEO go. I didn't have room for both of them in the organization. And he would not probably have wanted or survived a transition to a different role, right? That's a really hard thing to do. So he exited, and I asked that president to take the CEO role for a year because he is really good at operationalizing things and really good at strategy, but good at execution and getting it done. And I felt like he would do a better job than I would at aligning the teams while I focused on sort of announcing to the world and the industry that we have this new company and new brand. So I was able to spend my time really socializing that with all of our customers because both companies went through a name change and it sort of changed our brand and who we were. New logo, new name. Talk about trademarks. I know all about that, you guys. So I did that, and he took that role on for a year and a half actually, and then I transitioned again. So he moved to a strategy officer position because of where he was in his career. Wanted a little less day-to-day. I stepped in as the CEO, and then I brought up one of our directors to be the president. So I brought up someone who was really good at day-to-day operations, knew the business, knew the managers and the leaders, well respected. And so he came in as the president to take care of day-to-day so that I can, take care of the culture, the strategy, the relationships, manage the risk. And it's a struggle. I have to learn to let go. I'm a doer, like I said earlier, and I like to get in there. And sometimes I'm a doer on like some of the details, or I really shouldn't be down in there at all. But it's like stuff that I like our contracts and pricing kind of stuff. Like I really like having my hands in our financials. But I need to learn to let that go a little bit. And I do a lot. Like Anna said, I'm on the board for Space Center Houston. I'm on multiple boards. I'm like a shameless supporter of women, girls in STEM, all of that stuff. So I love being able to do that. It gives me the flexibility to do that. But it's a trade-off also, letting some of those things go. And he's learning how to be an executive. My president is. So he's great at being a president, but he hadn't had to consider things at the company level before, certain risks or certain ideas. He was cash is king, right? Everybody says that, but not for us because we're a cash basis taxpayer. So here's just like a quick example. Last year, he was going to bring in some cash in December, and I said, no, I don't want you to bring that cash in December. I'm going to have to pay taxes on it. Push it to January. And he's like, I thought I was doing a good thing, bringing cash in for you. Cash is king. I said, no, I don't want it in December. I want the cash in January. So we kind of had to rework some stuff to push the cash out so I could, not have a big tax event. But so it's things like that in our transition that we're learning as we go through.
Yeah. I want to leave y'all with this image of this is boots back on the ground on the moon. And as we think about all of these big missions that we have with our teams, whether it's at Aegis or at NASA or other companies in the industry, I'll just say, I'll admit that space is a pretty easy mission and vision to get behind, right? And as we see some of those things coming to life, like the boots on the ground in hopefully 26, maybe 28, when that happens again, we get people excited, right? And we think about that. With your businesses, thinking about what is that mission that pushes people forward, what's the meaning that you're giving to them, is that they get to help give an awe-inspiring culinary experience to guests? Is it that they get to help celebrate local foods or local traditions? Is it that they get to provide some family time or community time with loved ones? And what are they giving back to the community? So I feel like the mission always helps us, the vision forward always helps us to motivate those folks. And we know, as we've been talking with Stephanie and as all you were sharing your experiences, there are a lot of little details and a lot of things to hold as you go forward in that vision. But we hope that we were able to offer some helpful tips today, some helpful insights that you can take back with you. And we'd love to stay in contact. We have our emails up here at the top of the list. I've also listed a couple things around Space Center Houston. If you have time before you leave the city, if you want to come visit us, we're down about 30 minutes down the road in the southeast part of Houston. We'd love for you to come, or if there's any other way that we can think that you can think that we can help drive your mission forward and drive your teams forward, we'd love to do that. So thank you, Stephanie, for being in conversation, and thanks everybody for joining us today.